Count another grip, smoke another zip. Let them young niggas tell it I be on my shit. Make 100K, spend it all the day.
Don't make me kill no motherfucking body in here. I'ma shoot 3 shots.
Cookie! Nom nom nom, oh nom 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 nom.
lông đường.
Не понял, что 150?
Ну 100 минет, 150 ночная минет.
Я говорю, сколько до Херсона осталось еще?
А, до Херсона час езды.
Хорош, нахуй.
По будням с 14 до 15 на наших новых местах стартует игра.
Ты сам знаешь. Десяточку давай. Десяточку, да. Ух ты, ёпта. Ебись! Иначе красавчик снял, ебать!
Put the pump in neutral, you fucking idiot. Look at the wheel, look at the shocks down there. Couldn't see if he was slamming.
Look at all the rubbish floating around. The ship just landed. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Early in the morning when I'm away. Hey, hey, don't you know? Yes, you'll be sorry for the times I
Ебать, Люсю нахуй, блядь.
Mañana tengo que salir con las tipo las ¿cuál es el cambio aquí de madera? 1,25 €.
Не можем растолкать уже какой час времени. Машины туда-сюда, скорая, виу-виу-виу, туда-сюда едут, а машины вперед не едут. Вот и все. Стоим, расталкиваем. Уч!
Hey mommy, hey mommy, hey mommy, hey mom.
Почувствовать себя важной птицей дали возможность кемеровские полицейские обычному гусю, который был задержан в составе группы автоугонщиков. На первых этапах расследования стало понятно, что пернатый оказался замешан в криминальную историю.
Mama, I'm a criminal. Mama, I'm a criminal. Mama.
Oh my god. You fucking kids! I've got places to be!
Goodbye, my lover. Goodbye, my friend. You have been the one.
One man.
Hallo liebe Leute, hier habe ich eine wunderschöne Fender, eine meiner Lieblingsfenders.
One dream.
Hilfst du mir wieder? Sonst war nicht richtig weg.
Soll ich vielleicht ein dickeres Stück Zeitung nehmen? Ich habe jetzt nur so einen Streifen.
Dann möchte ich schnell raus.
Sieht aber ein bisschen aus wie draufgekotzt.
Won't you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah.
Emails. I mentioned before, we have emails in that we respond to. And I thought, this one just came in, I think, today. Yeah, it came in this morning. And I thought that I wanted to go on the show today and not do my usual thing of, well, I don't have a topic, let's just, you know, how I am with Matt, right? No, I thought, well...
Because I expect a little more.
Yes, you do. I just sort of, because that really hurt last time when you, like, just left, you know, I've learned my lesson about, you know, so, anyway, yes, here's an email that came from a fan in Italy. And his name is, well, yeah, I'll just say Sergey. Yeah, you go ahead and tell his name. Young guy, and what he's essentially, he's an atheist. He's one of our viewers. And I told him that I was going to go ahead and address this today on the program because I thought, well, okay, I can just email him back. But no, this one's a really great one to sort of take down publicly, live, with blood and pie afterwards. He is in a discussion or an argument with a professor. Okay, with now I'm astonished at. I mean, I wonder what kind of professor this man can be. Maybe theology.
That's possible.
Okay, because if this man is a professor, I am astonished to contemplate just how someone this dumb can get a professorship in Italy. I mean, are the educational standards in that? Italy has a wonderful intellectual cultural tradition. It hurts me to think that there are professors like this apparently out there trying to undermine that.
They also have the Holy Roman Catholic Church.
Well, yeah, but you know, so there's, I guess, you know, maybe this is a professor of Vatican nonsense, you know, whatever. But anyway, Sergey writes us, and he tells us about this discussion he's having with this professor, and he says, you know, and I'm going to be meeting with this guy this week to talk some more about this stuff, and just to go through pretty quickly. Apparently, he pointed this professor towards this website, God is Imaginary, with some, and the professor responds to some of this, and he starts out by saying, and I'm just going to go through this bit by bit quickly to illustrate just where the apologetics fail is happening, okay, and the making stuff up and the equivocating everything. The professor starts out by saying, oh, I'm not going to do the accent. I just got done reading through a few of the God Imaginary proofs, and I have this to say. Most of their proof is against a straw man, and then he goes on sort of pompously to explain what a straw man is. Okay, well, this is fundamentally the courtier's reply that P.C. Myers came up with in response to the people attacking Dawkins for not having this sufficient understanding of, you know, complex theology. It's always, you know, a skeptic or an atheist will criticize some aspect of Christian belief, and then the believer can just, oh, well, you have a very shallow and insipid understanding of these things, when in fact it's all extremely deep, and you're not really getting to the meat of it because you're ignorant and you haven't studied
Which
this kind
I still
of thing.
say is interesting, because without a God to examine, how can you know more than someone else?
Well, that's a point, yeah. But anyway, here's the example that was given. We're, you know, before we've talked about things like, you know, problem of evil, like deliberate acts of evil, like child rape and crimes and things that involve free will. Well, what about natural things, tragedies like cancer? Here's the question that was raised. For instance, a professor responds, why doesn't God answer the prayer to cure cancer? They, you know, those pesky pain-in-the-ass atheists, they argue that it doesn't work. Period. Trouble is, cancer is being cured day by day. It will be cured, now you guys are going to love this, you're going to love this. He says it will be cured within 100, well, first off, he asserts that it will be cured within 100 years for sure, more likely within 20, glad you're confident about that.
Yeah,
Are you, what, are you a professor of oncology now? Because he sounds really, probably not. But he says this, listen to this. This is the great part. God is answering the prayers of many righteous people who not only prayed, but backed up their prayers with money, research, dedication, and science.
So this is the God helps those
Wait.
who help themselves argument. You do it yourself, and then you thank God.
Well, if prayer needs to be backed up with money, research, dedication, and science, why waste time with the prayer part?
Isn't it right?
What role does prayer play in any of that?
Doesn't Russell use the example of taking 2 aspirin and praying for your headache to go
Yeah,
away?
and the headache went away. That's exactly what this fellow is doing. Okay. So he's saying, yes, God is answering prayers.
Okay.
It's just people got to do stuff, and when they do stuff, but that's actually God answering the prayer. Yeah. A little odd, yes. But then he goes on and he mentions some stuff that's historically false. Actually, he says if you study the history of medicine and medical research, you'll find that much of it owes its present status to Christians, Christian universities, Christian hospitals, which is actually pretty ahistorical. I mean, the history of medicine is pretty much
we have St. Jude's Hospital today, and
transcultural. In the Middle Ages, right, which falls within the period that he's about to talk about here. The most okay, gotcha. In the Middle Ages, the most advanced medicine that was actually going on was coming from the Arab world, the Islamic world. Now, they were still wrong, right, because they were working off Galenism, which came from Greece. And so it's all about the 4 humors and what have you.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But this was a time when, so that was actually the most advanced medicine at that time. And then in throughout all human cultures, you've had this or that or the other advance, and someone going along to fix some errors in our knowledge and what have you. But to claim that, again, it's mostly due to Christians, that's just plain ahistorical. But again, what he says is these same Christians prayed greatly each time they invested in research, outreach, and care. So what did it? Was it he seems to think it's the prayer that did it, and the research, outreach, and care, the actual science that followed the prayer, had really no part. Or did it? I mean, you think this man being a professor would understand that what he's just made is a testable claim.
Yeah.
Okay? We can do this. We can actually run an experiment. If he's saying that, is he implying that only research that is backed up by prayer ends up having positive results?
Right.
Or is he saying simply that, yes, prayer happens, but you got to have human activity to back the prayer up to get those results, in which case, why do we need prayer at all?
Correct.
No, he goes back and forth, and he doesn't really, explain which of those two kind of conflicting positions he actually holds.
It's like the children's story with the stone soup. I won't go into it, but you can look it up online if you're not familiar. Stone soup.
But what he doesn't get with when atheists ask these questions is, look, why can't prayer simply be sufficient in and of itself? You are essentially talking about. Well, here I'll give a much better example. When he goes on, he goes on to say prayer works, but sometimes very slowly. Okay. And then he goes on to claim that he's annoyed with atheists because we're actually asking, well, why doesn't God answer prayers? We're asking, they're defining, when he says prayer doesn't work, they're defining doesn't work to mean doesn't work magically or doesn't work instantaneously.
Sort of like it was described in the Bible.
Well, he says, Jesus never said that. He said neither do most Christians.
He said you can move a mountain.
Yeah, that bit, right? The whole grain of a mustard seed, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, Mr. Professor, yes, in fact, Christians do claim this. We get calls on this show, and we get emails from people claiming, yes, God answered my prayers, and they describe a miraculous instant event.
Women who couldn't have children that were barren in the Old Testament, praying, giving birth to children.
But again, what are we doing here? It's called no true Scotsman now, this fallacy. Well, real Christians don't say that.
Right.
So look at what he gets to do. It's just, imaginary beings are wonderful because you can just keep moving the goalposts and making stuff up to respond to criticisms. Christians say, well, God can do this. Well, if God can do this, how come he doesn't do this, that, and the other thing? Well, I didn't really mean that God does this, right? What God really does is more like this. You see, you can just keep bouncing around. It's just sort of, you spin around and around in a rhetorical cul-de-sac until you're all dizzy and you don't know where the conversation began. But he says, prayer works, but sometimes it works very slowly. To God, the Bible says 1,000 years is as a day. Since the year 1010, just think how much has been cured. It's amazing. And in just one day of God's time. Isn't that awesome?
It's awesome for God, but what about all the people that died in that 1,000 years?
No, I'm just, in terms of like this sort of bogus argument, right? Look at what he's able to do, because he can just make this stuff up. So he can respond to atheist criticisms of why doesn't God just cure stuff instantaneously? Well, he says, well, God really does. It's just that instantaneously to God is 1,000 years to us. So he really is answering prayers instantaneously.
It is wild that this is coming out of Italy with a history of miracle belief.
Right. Again, but you can just sort of deny these things, right? You can just do this kind of, when you have an imaginary being that you are trying to defend, you defend him with these fantastic flights of imagination. Because, but this is just a hilarious example of this sort of thing, and I'm really, really stunned. So if Sergey is watching this, or if he sees it later on Blip TV or something like this, just you tell your professor that I'm absolutely amazed that someone, actually tell him that this professor has my thanks, because we live in Texas, where the educational standards are known to be pretty abysmal, and they've just gotten worse. And to know that there is somewhere else other than Texas that a person this stupid can become a professor of anything kind of makes Texas look not so bad this week. So thanks for that, Professor. But it really is just incredible. So in other words, according to this professor, the results of prayer are indistinguishable from the results of hard work and human effort.
I would agree.
Yeah, it's all the same. So
I think they are indistinguishable.
So that's just some of the apologetics fail that we get in emails, and that some of our viewers and listeners tell us that they hear, and email us some more.
The content of this video is produced by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. If you enjoyed this content and are willing and able to provide a donation, please visit the website below.
With an open mind, you may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion. For the sake of the world, this delusion. It's
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of The Atheist Experience. It's Sunday, March 28th, and we're broadcasting live from Austin, Texas. I'm Tracy Harris, and today I'm joined by co-host Martin Wagner.
Hello.
This is a call-in program. We'll have the number up on the stream shortly. If you're not watching this program live, you can tune in on Sundays from 4:30 to 6 p.m. and watch us on Time Warner and Grand Cable Channel 16, or you can watch the show over the internet from just about anywhere via Ustream or Channel Austin Stream. For more information, visit the show's website, www.atheist-experience.com. Be sure to check out the fact page at the site that covers some of our most common questions we received from viewers. Also at our website, you can access past episodes by clicking on the archive link, and you can see full episodes of the show at Blip TV, or you can subscribe to our audio podcast. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. ACA has weekly meetings at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road every Sunday from 11:30 to 1, except for the first Sunday of each month, which is reserved for our lecture series held at the Austin History Center on 9th and Guadalupe. Lectures begin at 12:15 p.m., and the next lecture will be April 11th. For more information about ACA, visit the website at www.atheist-community.org. In addition to this program, ACA sponsors a bi-weekly audio podcast called The Nonprophets. That's Nonprophets. You can download past episodes from the website, www.nonprophetsradio.com. The show will be live on April 10th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. If you'd prefer sending us an email rather than giving a call live, you can send comments or questions to tv@atheist-community.org. In addition to our media outreach programs, ACA also sponsors a number of social events, including an atheist happy hour on Thursdays at 7 p.m. at the Dog and Duck on 17th in Guadalupe. We also meet for dinner after the show at Threadgill's downtown location, 301 West Riverside Drive, starting at around 6:30 p.m. Be sure to check out the unofficial show blog at atheistexperience.blogspot.com, as well as the comprehensive counter-apologetics wiki at ironchariots.org. So, Martin, how are you doing
Hi,
today?
Tracy.
Got to do my bars.
There. Oh.
How are you doing, and
I'm
what are we
great.
talking about?
I'm great. Just fine. Yourself?
I'm doing good.
Lovely spring almost.
Awesome.
It is actually now spring.
Yeah, awesome
'cause
weather.
yeah, it's fantastic.
A lot of gardening.
So a good day to be in here. It would be so nice if we could do an outdoor episode.
Summit Town Lake, maybe?
Yeah, and like actually go live out and just, and there we are all out by
Barton
the,
Spring.
the
Wouldn't it-
trees and then by the springs.
Maybe
and
something taped one day.
I have to do that or something like that. So anyway. Oh, but, well, gosh, there's so much to talk about. It's actually been a rather eventful last couple of weeks in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Religion related as well as, politically and what have you. We've had ongoing horrors having to do with the Roman Catholic Church and all manner of, more. It's amazing to me that, 8 years ago when it was me and Ashley on the program, and the whole scandal was breaking, and with the priests and the thousands and thousands and thousands of molested children, and here we are in 2010.
Still talking
and
about
it's
it.
still going on.
It's still going on, yeah.
And you still have the Pope making excuses. This thing that just, he was quoted today in the news. Here's what old Ratzinger had to say about all of this. Apparently, we're the ones with the problem. Yes, if it weren't for the fact that all of these pesky non-Catholics were bringing this stuff up, right? I mean, it's our problem for calling them out on it. If we would just shut up about all of this and let them go molest kids in peace, there wouldn't be a big public stink about everything that's happening. What the Pope thinks about this is his quote, "From God comes the courage not to be intimidated by petty gossip." Now, I want you all to think about what he just said right there. Petty gossip. How many thousands of children were sexually molested over the years by Catholic priests? How many times did Ratzinger, is it known that Ratzinger shielded these guys, protected them from the law, protected them from prosecution?
Move them to different parishes.
Move them around.
Yeah, without warning parishioners what was happening. Yeah, that to me I think is the worst part of it.
And this is petty? The Pope thinks this is petty. Right? If you've read Hitchens, and you know Hitchens' famous quote about how religion poisons everything, this is about as good an example of that as you can possibly find. What religion does is it enables and facilitates atrocities in this way. God, okay, when the Pope says, "From God comes the courage not to be intimidated by petty gossip," what he's saying is, God allows arrogant evil men like me to claim that we are above ethical or moral standards of any kind. That's what religion allows. Religion doesn't provide a moral compass to people. What religion does is it hands you a hammer to smash your moral compass with. You can justify anything because you can say, "Well, God, I'm cool with God, so I really don't care what you think." God, of course, in pretty much all cases, being the idealized, projected self-image of the believer onto the universe.
Correct.
That's basically what God is. So, well, I'm sorry, Ratso, but what you are is a criminal. Okay? You should be arrested. You should be prosecuted. You should be thrown in jail to have a little bit, maybe of some of this pettiness come your way. And as far as the Roman Catholic Church, I think it's a criminal syndicate, and it ought to be shut down completely, and turn the Sistine Chapel into an art museum, and just get rid of these guys, because you're done. You're done. Okay? You've screwed up Western civilization for several centuries. We're done. Just go away, please, Catholic Church. Just go away. Just stop.
Okay.
Oh, that felt good. I enjoyed that. Yay. But what else were we going to... You and I, before the show, we were talking about just various things that we've been...
Well, before we go into something else, I just want to say this reminded me of something that I didn't think about when we were talking pre-show. I did watch one of the great debates with, I think it was Hitchens and another gentleman, and I apologize, I can't remember his name, and then there were two leaders, Catholic leaders, and they were talking about, is the church a force for good in the world, I think was the label of it.
Yeah.
And I remember...
That didn't work out too well for them, did it?
No, it didn't. But when Hitchens got up, of course, one of the main things they hit was the no condom policy in, AIDS-ravaged Africa, where there's a huge mission there.
Not only that, but the Pope going there and claiming that condoms would actually spread AIDS more.
Right. Just it was horrendous. But I do remember that there was a gentleman and a woman that were representing the Catholic Church, and when the woman got up, she said something similar to what you just read as far as that quote, which was, "Oh, I knew when someone got up there that they were going to bring up this condom and AIDS in Africa thing." And it was one of the two gentlemen, either Hitchens or his partner, when they got up, said, it's sort of like somebody who's in jail for theft, getting before having a lawyer come up and say, well, I knew somebody was going to bring up this, prior record.
All your crimes I did, yeah.
And it's interesting that that a person can look at this horrible harm that's being done due to a direct doctrinal preaching, and then turn around and say, I can't believe people are going to call us on this. And in this case,
they think they're above it.
Right. Now, in this case, it's a little different because I understand that that's not like a doctrinal directive to molest children, as opposed to the condom issue, which really is a doctrinal directive. It's a direct harm caused as a result of Orthodox doctrine.
Yeah, but it's a kind of rationalization.
Right. But
the
idea that there's something wrong with being critical of it.
Yeah, the whole rationalizations kick in about, we can do whatever we want because...
How can you not expect criticism for something that causes so much harm? I mean, you need to expect that kind of criticism.
If you don't like being called out on the things you do, don't do them.
Right.
I mean, you'd think that would be a basic principle.
Or at least show some level of understanding for why people would be critical of something that you've done when it causes harm.
Yeah, I mean... a little bit of contrition, even a tiny bit.
Or I would even say compassion.
Yeah.
I mean, for me and you, we're looking at this and we're not even involved. But imagine your feelings if you had been molested. How aggravating that quote would be.
Yeah, so it's aggravating is a mild way to put it, but yeah.
Yeah, to me, that kind of slap in the face
it's a dismissal.
A victimized child.
It's a complete dismissal of a traumatic event that literally screws people up for life. I mean, psychologically, you don't get over that kind of thing. And the Pope's just like,
petty, what do you call it? Petty?
Petty gossip.
Gossip, gossip.
Gossip, it's gossip. No, gossip is talking about who, Mary Kay, whatever, the twins, whoever they're banging this week. That's gossip, okay? You guys banging little kids ain't gossip, it's crime.
Yeah.
Gossip, crime. Big distinction. Right, wow. Well, speaking of lame rhetorical justifications for things,
right.
we get emails. And a lot of our emails are from fans, and we're happy to hear from you. Hi back. We love you guys. And some of our emails are from theists who want to wag their finger at us, or maybe hit us with some new argument that we don't think, that they don't think we've heard before. And sometimes we get quite a lot of emails from atheists who are themselves engaged in discussions with theists, and they're sort of like, well, how do I reply to that one? And then sometimes they'll go on to give us the examples of whatever it is, whatever apologetics they're hearing. And I don't know about you, Trace, but I would suspect that you would agree. I've never heard any real exercise in apologetics that to some degree, or to a very great degree, didn't just involve making a bunch of stuff up, asserting the things that you make up as factual,
right,
not feeling that you have to back them up, and then declaring that you've scored a point or a big argumentative victory.
Yeah, you pretty much have to make things up because you're talking about things that are, by definition, not examinable or verifiable.
Right. And you were talking about earlier, you were dealing with, someone emailed us about Problem of Evil.
Correct.
And then I had a guy that I was going to respond to. But first off, what came before the whole, we were, talking about the child molestation thing.
Right.
That always tends to, because that's the most abominable act, I think, across the board that people can sort of bring up whenever you want to talk about evil. But we got an email from a theist, and what all did he say about that? Because
that actually was not a discussion I was involved in, but in watching the discussion on the list, it just reminded me of so many past discussions on Problem of Evil. And I know we've done a show, I think it was Russell who did the show on Problem of Evil, so I don't want to rehash that, but basically the idea is that since bad things happen to innocent people, and by innocent I would say, let's even say an infant, or good people, or people who don't seem to deserve the horrible things that happen to them, however you want to define it, things happen that aren't good all the time, and when that occurs, and you have, the idea of if someone has a model of a God that is all powerful, all knowing, and all loving, you have to ask yourself, how does evil get through the filter? So is it that God could stop it and doesn't, and chooses not to, or is it that he would stop it but can't? And I think the thing that stuns me is how many people write to us in order to say, I have a response to problem of evil, and then their rebuttal entails either God being unable to stop it and wanting to, or God being able to stop it but not willing to.
Yeah.
So their rebuttal to problem of evil generally becomes just simply an explanation for why God is willing to allow evil, or how come God can't stop evil.
Right.
And then they say that's the rebuttal.
Admitting that there is a problem does not constitute
It's like,
rebutting
yes,
the problem.
we understand that it's either allowed or
Yes, you're right.
or can't be stopped.
God lets all this stuff happen, you betcha.
And one
he
of the
has his reasons
I
that
mean,
we don't get because of our puny human intellect.
One of the ones that comes up most often is God wants to allow free will. And I think we were talking before on the idea that it doesn't always involve will. We had an incident here in Austin, and I almost feel guilty picking on it because my sympathies go out to the family. I don't want to use this as necessarily, I feel bad using this incident, even bringing it up, but I want to just say that, I'm sympathetic to everybody involved in this. But there was an unfortunate incident that happened here not long ago where someone drove to work and they forgot they had their child in the back of the car. And here in Texas during the summer, it gets extremely hot extremely quickly. You cannot leave animals or infants in your vehicle. Even with the windows cracked, it doesn't help. And you would think, like, oh, that's unfortunate. You think you know where this is going, but you don't, because what happened is somebody saw the child in the car, reported it to security, and said there's a baby in a car, and the car's locked and it's shut up and there's nobody there. And security apparently was unable to find this vehicle. The woman had left and the child died. So in this case, this didn't involve a conflict of free will
at any point.
with something bad happening. This was simply someone who did not will their own child to die, who simply forgot. It was just a brain hiccup, forgot something extremely important.
And we'll set aside the whole issue of how a parent can be stupid enough to forget your child.
He's not the first person to have done this. It can happen. It was not a purposeful thing. It was not. He wasn't intending to harm his child. And then what happens is you have a bystander who sees this. She does the right thing and reports this. Then you have security that goes out looking. They don't find this. And at any point in this, there could have been a reasonable save of this child without anybody batting an eye or thinking that it was divine intervention, no show of the hand of God, no violations of physical reality. And it could have just been that the person reported it, security, she brought them to the car, and they found the kid was saved.
Yeah.
So these things happen, and it's not always in conflict with free will. But even when it is, it gets a little hairy, because what happens is they'll say, well, God allows evil because he wants people to be able to do evil. And so they're talking specifically about evil perpetrated on other people by people who intend harm. So we usually ramp it right up to child rape. And the reason we go there is because this is something that is egregious to most people's minds. And so it becomes the perfect model of what to use to say, okay, we all agree this is not good. So, okay, child rape. And then the response that is most shocking is when people say, well, God wants people to be able to act on their free will, even though he doesn't always like what they do. And the example that I gave was if I open the door of a room and I see a child about to be raped by someone, and I close the door and back out and do nothing, and then someone finds out about that and they confront me, they would think that I was monstrous. And if I were to say, no, believe me, nobody thinks this is more heinous than I do, but the fact is, I don't want to impede the free will and free action of this rapist, because to me, that's a higher priority than this child's welfare and safety. I can't imagine any person not thinking that I was completely inexcusable, like in my action and my explanation. It would be completely non-acceptable to any compassionate human being. And yet, they use this as their model of God, to say that God prefers to protect the will and action of really wicked people instead of defending the helpless. And that in that case, what I have to say is what you're saying is that God is able to intervene but doesn't.
Chooses
so
not
this
to.
is unwilling to stop evil, which the problem of evil says, yes, your God is either going to be unwilling to stop this evil or he's going to be unable.
yeah.
And when someone says unable, what we get with the unable is usually they'll say something is required. So they'll say either free will is a requirement of some sort in order to achieve some ends. And what you're saying in that case is that there's not some other way to do this without child rape being a part of this universe. So in other words, God set up this universe in such a way that he's going to let people do what they want to do.
Including that.
Yeah, including child rape. And then he's going to sort this out later, however he's going to sort it out. But the fact is, there could be a universe where there isn't child rape and where people still have free will. And usually, I think it was Jeff who brought up to the person that, do you think there's free will in heaven, and is there child rape in heaven? And normally, everybody will say, yes, you have free will in heaven, and no, there's not child rape. And so it's like, okay, well, then you acknowledge that there is such a universe as one that doesn't restrict your free will and doesn't allow for child rape, and yet this is not the universe that we live in, so what gives? And I just want to kind of point out that if you're going to respond to problem of evil, you're going to have to come up with something different, because both those scenarios hit on either God is unwilling or God is unable to stop, what would be considered evil under the POE.
Yeah, well, and another reason why the appeal to free will fails so phenomenally as a response to the POE is that it fails to make the fundamental distinction between free will and action.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, free
some
will.
Some people don't separate them. I do.
Yeah, well, I think you should, because free will simply implies the ability to make a decision about something, or the ability to want to do something.
Correct.
Or to have a certain viewpoint or mode of thought.
Right.
And but it has nothing to do with the ability to act. I imagine that there are millions of paraplegics in the world who want to be able to walk and run and swim and jump and play and do stuff. I mean, that their free will is saying, damn, I wish I could move and get up out of my wheelchair. But that physically they cannot. Okay, so has their free will been impeded? Well, no, it hasn't. Okay, their ability to act has, because they have a physical disability.
Yeah.
But they can want all they want. I mean,
mentally they're not robots.
Right.
They're not stripped of free thought.
And that's the problem when apologists will say, well, but if God interfered, then we'd be automatons and we would not. But no, not really. It's a wonderful response. I think it might have been Jeff some years ago when we were doing the show was. For example, if God were to save a child or to save a person miraculously from some impending disaster, et cetera, well, you'd just be God's robot. And it's like, okay, so if you fell off a pier and I jumped in and saved your life, that means you're my robot, right? Okay, you have to do everything.
Yeah.
So it's funny the ducking and the dodging and the weaving. I've not heard, but of course all of these claims are things that they just cannot verify. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's all a matter of just sort of rhetorical CYA.
Right. When you say that free will is important to God, basically you can't know that.
Right.
You can't know that. And I can't verify it. So when someone tells me God does this because he values the free will of a child rapist and the free action of a child rapist more than the welfare of a child, my response to that is I can't go ask God if he agrees with what you're saying about him, or her, or it. So I have no way to verify what you just said. And so for me, on my end, it's like you just made this up. Because there's no way I can verify it, and frankly, I don't know how you could verify it.
And doesn't the victim have free will, right? I mean, so if God is not intervening, and where you have both a victimizer and a victim, both of whom have free will, but the victimizer's got the upper hand.
Well, his free action is important.
Yes,
but the child's free action obviously is not.
Precisely. But when you have these people failing to make this distinction between action and will.
Right.
And you're essentially saying, okay, well then why is it exactly you want me to worship the patron god of child rapists? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it is a little weird.
Yeah.
And there was one thing I wanted to hit real quickly before we go on, and this was just sort of a hat tip to someone that wrote to us. A young man wrote to us, and he's got a YouTube channel. He's a disabled person who... from visually, when you see him in the videos, you can tell that he's disabled. And he wrote in and he had a statement that was sort of ambiguous, but when he clarified it, I understood immediately what he was saying. He was describing a trend that he saw when he argued with theists, and he felt that his disability was being sort of used in an unfair way against him. And we were like, well, what do you mean by that? And what he described, weirdly, was familiar to me, even though I had never heard this used against a disabled person before, and it was appalling. But what he said is that because he's disabled, theists tend to simply dismiss that he could possibly have anything reasonable or intelligent to say regarding this debate of the existence or non-existence of God, because clearly he's angry at God because he's disabled. So therefore, it's fair to dismiss anything he would have to say or think on this issue, which it's disgusting.
And it's your basic ad hominem.
Yeah, and
because you are X, your point of view can be discounted.
Well, what I wrote him back to say was that he's the first disabled person I've heard being hit with this, but I've heard other people hit with this, and ironically, it's people who were molested as children by church leaders. And if you're molested by a church leader as a child, I've seen letters on our list where people write in and say, I do everything I can to hide this because the moment it comes out, nobody believes I have anything of substance to say on this issue, and everything I say will be discounted because they're going to say I'm angry at God. And it doesn't matter that I have reasons for why I don't believe. It's like suddenly these people simply do not count in this debate. And I'm like, that must be so frustrating. It would be, for me as a woman, it would be like somebody every time I get upset saying, oh, you must be PMSing. It's like, I just couldn't possibly just be upset about something. It has to be PMS
typical
week.
Hysterical female.
So, yeah.
That's just you all over, right,
And
Tracy?
that just couldn't, I mean, to me, the idea that somebody would use that against a person who's disabled or a person who's been molested as a child and just say, I'm going to use this as my excuse why I don't even have to hear you. You have no voice because nothing you can say could possibly matter.
Right.
Is insult to injury.
Yeah, it's extremely cold. But again, it provides the convenient out for the apologist who can't really just, yes, well.
All I can say is that, before you write somebody off like that, at least give their arguments a listen and make sure that you can demonstrate that they are utilizing that they are in some way angry at God and expressing that anger at God and not giving you a decent argument, because you at least owe them to listen to what it is they have to say and to then make a judgment about whether or not your prejudice about them not being able to give you a decent argument is valid. So you at least have to give them a hearing, just like you would any other person who's not disabled or molested. I feel sad that I have to even say that.
I know, it's a real shame, but that is again one of these rhetorical little tricks that people just sort of kind of weasel out of.
Well, here's the odd thing. I had written to a friend of mine. I said, what's most interesting is that we often hear Christians ask, what happened to make you stop believing in or hate God? And ironically, we spend a lot of time dispelling this rumor by explaining it's not about a bad emotional experience. Really, the idea just doesn't make sense to us. But on the flip side, we get a lot of mail from Christians who get upset when we point out their personal subjective emotional experience they had when they were 16 doesn't count as a rational reason or evidence that their belief in God is correct. So they do this very thing, and then they turn around and say, oh, you're doing this. And it's like, no, you're doing this. On the one hand, it's almost hypocritical that they accuse atheists of doing what they turn right around and do. On the other hand, it makes perfect sense to project. If this is how I think, this must be how you're thinking.
Well, they extol the emotional aspect of conversion as a great virtue and a benefit and why it's so wonderful now.
But why is it that their emotional experience validates their God? But if someone were to, I'm not saying
precisely,
but if someone had a negative emotional experience and they say because of this there is no God, wouldn't that be just as valid?
Emotional reasons for belief are okay. Emotional reasons for disbelief
are not
even if they really were the reasons.
Yeah.
Suddenly are not valid. Right.
Right. I mean, to me, if somebody says, well, I had this positive emotional experience and that, to me, demonstrates I know there is a God, then it should be valid for somebody to say, well, I had a really bad experience in church when I was a kid and it turned me off, and that, to me, means I know there is no God. And if you're going to use your emotional experience as evidence of God, then somebody's negative emotional experience should be evidence there is no God. I think it's both ridiculous, but you can't accept one and reject the other. On what grounds would you do that?
And Christians find it really baffling when I tell them that I have nothing really but positive memories of growing up in the church that we went to in Houston when I was an adolescent.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of fond memories of those days.
Yeah. Wow, I was involved.
Because the fun that I might have had going to sleep with the lock-ins at the church rec room or camp or whatever we did, or little socials with all that's got nothing to do with the question of whether or not any of this is true.
Right.
Right. Whether or not the fundamental question of does a God exist is entirely separate. And so I have another letter from a guy that I would like to respond to, but we've had some callers waiting for a while.
Okay.
I think why don't we go ahead and take these first couple of callers, and then I'll go ahead and read this in a few minutes because we're a half hour in, and so let's go ahead and get the show.
What do you think?
Well, Jim was first.
Yeah.
So thanks for holding, callers. Jim,
go ahead, Jim, from New Jersey.
Hi, Martin, Tracy.
How you doing?
It's a pleasure to speak to both of you today. I was really hoping on catching Matt, but I understand he's sick. Not that I disrespect either one of you. You're all just fine.
Good.
So the Pope said the sex scandal was petty gossip, huh? Oh my goodness, will that man stoop to anything lower than that?
He probably will, yes.
I'm waiting to see it. But that's not why I called. I called because, being unemployed, I've been watching a lot of TV lately.
Oh, boy.
There's a show that comes on, ironically, on Sunday. Well, maybe not ironically, I'm not sure. It's called A Haunting. And it's a story. Yeah. It's every hour this thing is on. It's on back-to-back, like, or sometimes a whole day. And where a family moves into a house and they start hearing footsteps and then they start seeing strange things. And it always ends up the ghosts are throwing stuff at them. And then only the Catholic Church can save them. They come in and they do a little blessing, or sometimes they go all the way to exorcism, and problem solved. Now,
Get in there and rape those ghosts, and just right there. I tell you.
Yeah, well, now, I'm a non-believer like you guys, which means that I don't believe in ghosts, I don't believe in goblins or demons or any of that crap. No supernatural stuff. Because sometimes I start to wonder, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm wondering what your take on this is. Is it all just made-up stories? Is it just...
Are you asking about this, like these shows in particular?
Well, that's what really sets me off. I mean, these particular shows.
I can tell.
There's a lot of shows like that out there.
There are, yeah. Just about every network is out there. It's ready. I will tell you why the show The Haunting, is on the air right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little movie called Paranormal Activity. Made $107 million at the box office.
And it was a lousy movie.
Television is a business. They're about the ratings. They're about the advertising dollars. They're about the money. This year it's ghosts. Who knows what it'll be? Next year, whatever. That's really what it is. Because what happens on that show, like you described it, right? Every week now you basically get a new episode of Paranormal Activity on TV. They're just trying to cash in on that little on a box office popular trend. It's entertainment. You're right. Yes, television quite frequently because they don't care, right? They'll blur the line between entertainment and what's fiction and what's fact. Because they can, they're not in the business of being educational. And what really, I'll tell you what burns me up about a lot of those shows is when networks. I can understand maybe something like Fox, filling their airtime with crap like this, right? But it really frustrates me when you get on these networks that are supposed to be educational networks, right? The History Channel,
right? No,
the Learning Channel. All of these networks, Discovery even. All of these all of these networks that ought to have some sort of scientific and scholarly credibility to their programming are just doing all of this paranormal BS just day in and day out, and of course they have a couple of guys. We're going to investigate and be scientific about it, and then they show up and go, ghosts, and that's the extent of their scientific investigation, right? So that I think is just it's doing a disservice. You're fundamentally making a very large television audience stupid for the benefit of advertising dollars and ratings.
Well, I had suggested one time that maybe we should do like an offshoot where we go to haunted places and sit around doing nothing all night as a group and film it. Like just waiting for something to happen.
A whole hour of
nothing.
us
like hanging out in the hotel room.
Playing cards.
Yeah, and this is like the most haunted room in the hotel or whatever. And somebody responded, I think it was on the blog, and they said, what would you call it? Like, or they said, this week's, or an hour in carbon monoxide poisoning or something. It was like a joke about why people see these things in their house. And she was just like, this week in carbon monoxide poisoning.
Yeah, you guys might as well get in on it too.
Sometimes I think I'm in the wrong line of work, It's like, oh well.
I don't know. I was starting to think maybe the Catholic Church was sponsoring those programs.
Well, I'll say I did a show on a viewer who wrote in about a ghost story. And after I did that, one of the things she kept saying was, if you saw what I saw, you would believe this. And after I did that show, I got slammed by viewer mail where people were writing to me saying, I had the weirdest experience. And they were giving me these big breakdowns on these weird experiences. And then at the end, they would say, But I know I couldn't have seen what I saw, so I don't know what it was, but, you know, I know it wasn't a ghost, because there's no such thing. They were just like, I don't know what this is, but it's not, you know, it's probably just a trick of my brain. One guy said he stood and looked at his brother-in-law in the closet for like 5 minutes, standing there. He had woken up out of a sleep, which always makes me laugh. Anytime someone says I woke up, or I was just about to fall and go to bed, or, you know, I had just laid down for a nap, I mean, right there,
That's
you
sort of
lost me.
hypnagogic, yeah.
Yeah,
State.
so you got to at least be awake.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
At the bare
thanks a lot,
minimum.
guys. I appreciate talking to you. I appreciate your answers.
Sure.
Hey, Jim, thanks for calling, man.
All
Take
right,
care.
bye.
Righto.
And Luca was holding.
Yeah, Luca's been holding a while, and thank you very much. Luca?
Luca from New York.
Hello, how you doing, guys?
Thanks for waiting.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I love your show.
Thank you.
So what can we, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I'm an atheist, but I'm not particularly, aggressive about it. But you know, I live in New York, and every once in a while,
You live in New York and you're not aggressive? Come on, man.
People will come up to me and try to give me pamphlets and convert me and whatnot. And when they do that, they start the conversation. I feel I have the right to respond, and I have a couple of ways I try to convince them that God doesn't exist. And I'm wondering if you guys could tell me what you thought about these two arguments, and if you could maybe help me tweak them a little bit. And if you had something else, an even better way to talk about it. So my first argument is the basic inconsistency of the notion that, on the one hand, God created us in His image and He loves us and we're all His children, but He sends 80% of every generation to eternal torture, just on the basis of some arbitrary book or whatever. But so it's just if you loved your child, you wouldn't hit him with a baseball bat because he didn't brush his teeth.
Right.
So it's like a fundamental inconsistency. It just doesn't make sense that He would do that.
Okay.
And then my other argument is let's put the case that it's 100% true that it's God that faxed the facts of the Bible into the brains of the people that wrote it. It's divinely inspired, blah blah blah, and miracles are true and all that, right? So the fact remains that supposedly God is smarter than us. We have no way of understanding what His plan is and whatnot. So how do we know that God's plan is to write the Bible, which is making false claims about slavery being okay and rape being okay, for the purpose of testing whether we're smart enough to understand that those claims are false, and on that basis allow us into heaven if we manage to say, hold on, we should question everything because God gave us free will, and we should understand that the Bible is false and it's all a bunch of bullshit, and that's how we get into heaven.
Well, yeah, that's a fun sort of counter that I usually use when people bring up Pascal's wager, right?
Okay.
The whole, if you atheists are right, then I've lost nothing and we all just die. But if I'm right, then I get to go to heaven, you go to hell, so eh.
Yeah, you don't know that.
Right, but and what I say is, well, hang on. How do you know that what God's really doing is He has allowed this religion of Christianity to flourish? He has the Bible out there. It is all a load of BS. And what He is really doing is He is gauging the human race to see just who is using this gift of reason that He has bestowed upon us well enough to see through all of that. And really what's going on in heaven is that's where all the skeptics get to go. And all the believers get to go to hell for being suckers, right?
Exactly.
For swallowing all of this. How can they say that's not the case? But I don't know, I would say, and Tracy, I don't know, tell me if you agree with me, you're saying that these folks approach you?
Yeah, they're handing pamphlets on the subway.
Oh, right, okay, so they're the pamphleteering, okay.
These people share a prayer T-shirt and like all these real burn in hell. Oh yeah, they're all over the place. Trying to.
Yeah, okay, so they're doing the pamphleteering thing in the subway stations. Oh, I got to go to New York now. Well, what I would do is I would take a slightly different approach.
Okay.
Which is that I would just hand them the pamphlet back and I would say, thanks very much for this, but I understand what you're trying to do. But what I would rather hear is you tell me, and don't reference this pamphlet or anything, why don't you tell me, this is the classic atheist experience question.
I agree.
What do you believe? Don't look at the pamphlet, what do you believe, and then why do you believe it? Explain what you believe, and then tell me why you believe it. And then try to make a case, a persuasive case, for why I should believe it too. Convince me that the reasons why you believe what you believe are good enough reasons for me. Because a trap that atheists can often fall into when you're arguing with Christians and theists is that you end up bringing up all of these either doctrinal or points about, well, if God's really like this, then why doesn't he do this instead of that other thing?
And it's just a quagmire of presupposing God is already existing.
Yeah, and it leads into what we're talking about, our general subject of the show today, just sort of apologetics fail, where you're just giving them, because he's a made-up being in the first place, or because they have failed to establish that he is not just a made-up being, you're simply giving them a free ticket to just make stuff up in response to your questions. You know, well, why does God allow child rape? And then you get the William Lane Craig's thing where, well, God, you know, as you said right here, in one of your examples, he's beyond our understanding, right? God has reasons that we don't get because our puny human brains, which he created, so you would think he would have made them better, you know, and more functional. But apparently, he made us he made us stupid so that we wouldn't understand why he does things that he does that don't make sense. And you're just giving them a ticket to make stuff up in response. So I would just, you know, put them on the spot. They've got the burden of proof, not you. Make them answer those questions.
Two things I tend to hit are, number one, what is it that you're defining as God? Because whatever you're going to claim about God, I need to be able to reference this thing so that I can verify that what you're saying is true. So whatever you say about God, I've got to be able to go over here and examine that God and say, I agree or don't agree with what you just said about it. Otherwise, you're telling me stuff about something I can't verify, and I have no way to know if what you've said is accurate or not. So unless I know what you're calling God, and it is something I can compare your claims to, I have no way. I mean, to me, that's the same as you might as well be making stuff up, because I have no reality to compare your claims to.
Right.
But number two is, if they do offer some, you probably won't get past that. But if you do get past a definition of God that you're willing to accept, at that point, you can't move into proofs such as an inspired Bible, because there's this reality that things that don't exist can't be the cause of other things. So that means that when somebody says, I accept the Bible as an inspired book that demonstrates God, the reality is, if there is no God, then that is not a book that is inspired by God. So first we need to establish whether or not there's a God. Then we can make a determination about whether or not that God would be responsible for writing this book. But if we don't know what God is and what God might do, we don't know if God would write a book or not. And you can't look at the book and say, well, it's obviously a book written by a God, because we don't know what a book written by a God would look like or how it would differ from a book written by people.
Right, exactly.
So
another thing I do sometimes when say, hey, do you believe in God? I say, no, I believe in Santa. Which is, you know, another version of the spaghetti monster argument. But, you know, like, because there's a book about Santa, there's, you know, a lore about that.
You can say Santa's you can meet Santa at the mall.
Well, and there is a historic, I think, personage of Santa at some point.
Yeah, he's real, you know, historically, sure.
So,
wouldn't it be awesome if, like, some church for Christmas or something, like, you know how the malls have Santa, and then for Easter they have the Easter Bunny, and you can just, I mean, why don't churches just ever, for the fun of it, just have like some dude dressed up as Jesus, and you can go and little kids can sit on it.
Back from the resurrection.
Or just not even that, you know, just have kids sit on it.
I was
take
thinking
pictures
Easter,
of
it would be pretty gruesome.
Yeah, well, see, they just don't want they don't like that idolatry thing, I suppose.
Okay.
But
well, I hope
we're
we
being
helped,
silly
Luca.
Now. Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is just, again, make sure, you know, put them on the spot and make them, you know, meet their burden.
Yeah, they have to demonstrate their claims.
Yeah.
I mean, they always tend to go back, go back to the Bible. I believe because in the Bible, because it's written by God and it's written by God.
Okay, but they have to demonstrate there's a God that could author that book.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't get to the book. It's like we can't talk about the book God wrote until we demonstrate there's a God. Until you can convince me a God exists, I'm not going to believe he's doing things. Right?
Right, but if Christians were smart enough to realize that they're making circular arguments, they wouldn't be Christians anymore.
Right, but you're asking what rebuttal can you provide, and I'm saying what Martin is saying, you know, you have to demonstrate this to me, and if you're going to demonstrate it to me, you're going to have to be reasonable, and that means that we're not going to talk about things you're telling me God does until I see that there really is this thing called God that you're talking about.
Yeah, and they're on script when they're doing this kind of public witnessing to you, and they want to sort of draw you into their script, and you got to kind of get them off script, and that will throw them off a bit, and then you can just sort of take it from there. But again, Tracy's right at the very basic level. They will state something, and I'm going to give some more examples of what this, you know, again, this sort of apologetics fail as, you know, an example of how they can just make stuff up in response to your questions because, you know, it's easy that way. It's all made up in the first place, and so they can just assert things, and they often do this. They will simply make an assertion They will state it as if it were axiomatic, as if it were self-evidently true, and then they'll go, ha-ha, so there's my answer to you. And you have to just explain to them or make them understand. You have to stop them even before they get to that point. And they'll say, well, in the Bible it says, okay, back up, because we still haven't established it. So work on that, and then, if you want to email us, if you have more questions about how to do your approach and everything like that, do so, please.
Yeah.
And happy to help out. But we're going to go ahead and maybe take a few other callers now.
Cool.
So,
all right, guys. Great talking to you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a go.
Okay. I would like to get in. I'm not going to take a long time with this. I'm not going to draw this out because we do have some other folks to get onto. But
Sure.
Again, this all ties in. Emails. I mentioned before, we have emails and that we respond to. And I thought this one just came in, I think, today. Yeah, it came in this morning. And I thought that I wanted to go on the show today and not do my usual thing of, well, I don't have a topic. Let's just, how I am with Matt, right? No, I thought, well.
Because I expect a little more.
Yes, you do. I'm just sort of, because that really hurt last time when you just left. I've learned my lesson about, So anyway, yes, here's an email that came from a fan in Italy, and his name is I'll just say Sergey. Yeah, you go ahead and tell his name. Young guy, and he's essentially he's an atheist. He's one of our viewers, and I told him that I was going to go ahead and address this today on the program. Because I thought, well, okay, I can just email him back. But no, this one's a really great one to sort of take down publicly, live, with blood, and pie afterwards. He is in a discussion or an argument with a professor. Okay, now I'm astonished at. I wonder what kind of professor this man can be. Maybe theology.
That's possible.
Okay, because if this man is a professor, I am astonished to contemplate just how someone this dumb can get a professorship in Italy. I mean, are the educational standards in that? Italy has a wonderful intellectual, cultural tradition. It hurts me to think that there are professors like this apparently out there trying to undermine that.
They also have the Holy Roman Catholic Church.
Well, yeah, but so there's, I guess, maybe this is a professor of Vatican nonsense, whatever. But anyway, Sergey writes us, and he tells us about this discussion he's having with this professor, and he says, and I'm going to be meeting with this guy this week to talk some more about this stuff, and just to go through pretty quickly. Apparently, he pointed this professor towards this website, God is Imaginary, the professor responds to some of this, and he starts out by saying, and I'm just going to go through this bit by bit quickly to illustrate just where the apologetics fail is happening, okay, and the making stuff up and the equivocating everything. The professor starts out by saying, I'm not going to do the accent. I just got done reading through a few of the God Imaginary proofs, and I have this to say. Most of their proof is against a straw man, and then he goes on sort of pompously to explain what a straw man is. Okay, well, this is fundamentally the courtier's reply that P.C. Myers came up with in response to the people attacking Dawkins for not having this sufficient understanding of complex theology. It's always a skeptic or an atheist will criticize some aspect of Christian belief, and then the believer can just, you have a very shallow and insipid understanding of these things, when in fact it's all extremely deep, and you're not really getting to the meat of it because you're ignorant and you haven't studied
Which
this kind
I still
of thing.
say is interesting, because without a God to examine, how can you know more than someone else?
Well, that's a point, yeah. But anyway, here's the example that was given. We're before we've talked about things like problem of evil, like deliberate acts of evil, like child rape and crimes and things that involve free will. Well, what about natural things, tragedies like cancer? Here's the question that was raised. For instance, a professor responds, why doesn't God answer the prayer to cure cancer? They, those pesky pain in the ass atheists, they argue that it doesn't work. Period. Trouble is, cancer is being cured day by day. It will be cured, now you guys are going to love this, you're going to love this. He says it will be cured within well, first off, he asserts that it will be cured within 100 years for sure, more likely within 20. Glad you're confident about that.
Yeah,
are you a professor of oncology now? Because he sounds really, probably not. But he says this, listen to this. This is the great part. God is answering the prayers of many righteous people who not only prayed, but backed up their prayers with money, research, dedication, and science.
So this is the God helps those who help themselves argument. If you do it yourself and then you thank God.
Well, if prayer needs to be backed up with money, research, dedication, and science, why waste time with the prayer part?
Isn't it
what role does prayer play in any of that?
Doesn't Russell use the example of taking 2 aspirin and praying for your headache to go away?
Yeah, and the headache went away. That's exactly what this fellow is doing. Okay. So he's saying, yes, God is answering prayers,
Okay.
It's just people got to do stuff, and when they do stuff, but that's actually God answering the prayer. Yeah. A little odd, yes. But then he goes on and he mentions some stuff that's historically false. Actually, he says if you study the history of medicine and medical research, you'll find that much of it owes its present status to Christians, Christian universities, Christian hospitals, which is actually pretty ahistorical. I mean, the history of medicine is pretty much
we have St. Jude's Hospital today, and
transcultural. In the Middle Ages, right, which falls within the period that he's about to talk about here. The most gotcha. In the Middle Ages, the most advanced medicine that was actually going on was coming from the Arab world, the Islamic world. Now, they were still wrong, right? Because they were working off Galenism, which came from Greece. And so it's all about the four humors and what have you.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But this was a time when, so that was actually the most advanced medicine at that time. And then in throughout all human cultures, you've had this or that or the other advance, and someone going along to fix some errors in our knowledge and what have you. But to claim that, again, it's mostly due to Christians, that's just plain ahistorical. But again, what he says is these same Christians prayed greatly each time they invested in research, outreach, and care. So what did it? Was it he seems to think it's the prayer that did it, and the research, outreach, and care, the actual science that followed the prayer, had really no part. Or did it? I mean, you think this man being a professor would understand that what he's just made is a testable claim.
Yeah.
Okay. We can do this. We can actually run an experiment. If he's saying that, is he implying that only research that is backed up by prayer ends up having positive results?
Right.
Or is he saying simply that, yes, prayer happens, but you got to have human activity to back the prayer up to get those results, in which case, why do we need prayer at all?
Correct.
No, he goes back and forth, and he doesn't really, explain which of those two kind of conflicting positions he actually holds.
It's like the children's story with the stone soup. I won't go into it, but you can look it up online if you're not familiar. Stone soup.
But what he doesn't get with when atheists ask these questions is, look, why can't prayer simply be sufficient in and of itself? You are essentially talking about. Well, here I'll give a much better example. When he goes on, he goes on to say prayer works, but sometimes very slowly. Okay. And then he goes on to claim that he's annoyed with atheists because we're actually asking, well, why doesn't God answer prayers? We're asking, they're defining, when he says prayer doesn't work, they're defining doesn't work to mean doesn't work magically or doesn't work instantaneously.
Sort of like it was described in the Bible.
Well, he says, Jesus never said that. He said neither do most Christians.
He said you can move a mountain.
Yeah, that bit, right? The whole grain of a mustard seed, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, Mr. Professor, yes, in fact, Christians do claim this. We get calls on this show, and we get emails from people claiming, yes, God answered my prayers, and they describe a miraculous instant event.
Women who couldn't have children that were barren in the Old Testament praying, giving birth to children.
But again, what are we doing here? It's called no true Scotsman now, this fallacy. Well, real Christians don't say that.
Right.
So look at what he gets to do. It's just, imaginary beings are wonderful because you can just keep moving the goalposts and making stuff up to respond to criticisms. Christians say, well, God can do this. Well, if God can do this, how come he doesn't do this, that, and the other thing? Well, I didn't really mean that God does this, right? What God really does is more like this. You see, you can just keep bouncing around. It's just sort of, you spin around and around in a rhetorical cul-de-sac until you're all dizzy and you don't know where the conversation began. But he says, prayer works, but sometimes it works very slowly. To God, the Bible says 1,000 years is as a day. Since the year 1010, just think how much has been cured. It's amazing. And in just one day of God's time. Isn't that awesome?
It's awesome for God, but what about all the people that died in that 1,000 years?
No, I'm just, in terms of like this sort of bogus argument, right? Look at what he's able to do, because he can just make this stuff up. So he can respond to atheist criticisms of why doesn't God just cure stuff instantaneously? Well, he says, well, God really does. It's just that instantaneously to God is 1,000 years to us. So he really is answering prayers instantaneously.
It is wild that this is coming out of Italy with a history of miracle belief.
Right. Again, but you can just sort of deny these things, right? You can just do this kind of, when you have an imaginary being that you are trying to defend, you defend him with these fantastic flights of imagination, because. But this is just a hilarious example of this sort of thing, and I'm really, really stunned. So if Sergey is watching this, or if he sees it later on Blip TV or something like this, just you tell your professor that I'm absolutely amazed that someone actually tell him that this professor has my thanks, because we live in Texas, where the educational standards are known to be pretty abysmal, and they've just gotten worse. And to know that there is somewhere else other than Texas that a person this stupid can become a professor of anything kind of makes Texas look not so bad this week. So thanks for that, Professor. But it really is just incredible. So in other words, according to this professor, the results of prayer are indistinguishable from the results of hard work and human effort.
I would agree.
Yeah, it's all the same. So
I think they are indistinguishable.
So that's it. So that's just some of the apologetics fail that we get in emails, and that some of our viewers and listeners tell us that they hear, and email us some more. But shall we go ahead and take another call?
Yeah, let's do some calls.
Let's do. We have Hunter on line 3. Are you with us?
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. I was just wondering, do you believe in evolution in the Big Bang Theory?
Well, first off, evolution and Big Bang Theory are sort of scientific subjects, so the belief doesn't really come into the thing. It's more, what can be demonstrated through evidence and what have you. So in terms of accepting evolution and Big Bang Theory as being where the evidence is pointing to us at this time, yeah, we accept those fields of science.
Okay, so basically you believe that...
Again, no, we don't believe anything that is scientifically related.
I know, but you kind of get what I'm saying. But basically what the Big Bang Theory states is that light beams came out of this big explosion and turned into protons, neutrons, and electrons, which later turned into an atom, and then turned into planets, and then turned into life. Is that what you believe?
I think that what you ought to do is look up Big Bang Theory on the internet. You can find a lot of sites, a lot of cosmological sites, a lot of sites having to do with astronomy and physics that will go into pretty easy to explain detail as to what physicists will tell you the Big Bang Theory actually says. The idea that to the universe, at some point, all of the matter in the universe was contained in either a singularity or some point, and that either through a quantum event or what have you, this singularity became unstable, it expanded. And remember, all that the Big Bang Theory states is it discusses an expansion event. Okay, it's not.
The universe is continuously expanding.
Yeah, and so at that point, but we are not physicists.
Yeah,
okay?
Honestly, this has nothing to do with why I would believe or not believe in a God.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go to evolutionary. I think that the Cambrian explosion completely blows evolution out of the water.
That's because you don't understand the Cambrian explosion.
The Cambrian explosion states that life happens spontaneously.
No, it didn't. No, it does not say anything about that.
Well, over a few, I don't know, was it like 1 year or something like
about
that?
About 80 to 100 million years is the period that is referred to as the Cambrian explosion.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I'm quite sure about that. What you need to do is go to actual science sources, websites and actual science books. Don't go to these creationist sources, okay, that are full of, and I'll be quite honest with you here. These are people in the creationist sources who have a vested interest in lying to you about what science says, because what they are doing is attempting to shore up a particular set of religious beliefs and a particular, shall we say, literalistic set of religious interpretation of Bible and Scripture, and trying to claim that that is scientifically supported. A great many Christians, and in fact some of the best scientists out there who are theists, like Ken Miller, Francisco Alea, guys like that, will fully, these are the guys out there who are doing the best refutations of some creationist claims, such as the claim against, a claim about irreducible complexity, or the Cambrian explosion, or what have you. They point out where these things are very deliberately being misrepresented by creationist sources. And so what I would suggest...
I actually looked it up, I just looked up Cambrian explosion, and it said it happened in a short period of time.
And what is the source?
That's what it said.
What is
a very short period of time.
Well, what source was that?
thing about the Cambrian explosion...
No, answer my question. What source was that told you it was a short period of time, as in 1 year? What was that source?
I'd have to go look it up. You want me to take the time to look it up?
No, honestly,
what you need to do is know where you're getting your information from. Yeah. You get something off of the internet, you say, oh, it says this. You don't even look to understand what, you don't see what the source is, you don't remember what the source is.
I could look up all that, but it would take up way too much paper.
Well,
I'm trying to save the trees.
No, the point is you need to know where you're getting your information from, and then you need to be able to understand if that is an actual reliable source or not.
Well, the other question is, have you presented a biologist with this, and what was the response you were given? Have you asked somebody who's an evolutionary biologist what they make of this, and what did they respond?
At a university or something.
Yes, my teacher actually said that it...
What grade are you in? Wait.
The thing about the Cambrian explosion is that single-celled organisms turned into spineless organisms, and there's nothing in between.
It doesn't say that either.
Of anything in between.
It doesn't say that either. Everything that you think you know about the Cambrian explosion is wrong.
There's no fossils. They searched in Japan for a
Hunter,
long time,
Hunter,
and they found no fossils.
Hunter,
there's a hold button.
Hunter, I'm going to cut you off here in a minute. You are getting incorrect information. You are stating things about the Cambrian explosion that are demonstrably false. And what I'm telling you to do...
on many sites.
No, you don't even know what these sites are. First it was one, now you're saying there are many. I think you're sitting there lying to me, Hunter. I don't think you've studied any of this at all. I don't think you've studied this stuff at all. If you've studied this, if you have studied this stuff at all, then what you need to do, if you want to be honest about this pursuit, if you really want to understand what evolution says, instead of just finding reasons to reject it by looking at creationist sources that are spreading falsehoods, you will look at all these different sources. But you can't even name your sources. You're simply telling us, I saw this online. Well, who wrote what you saw online? Who told you that there is no fossil record? Who told you that there is no line of lineage that we can trace? Who told you that this all happened in 1 year? Was this person an actual biologist, an actual paleontologist?
And do you believe that evolutionary biologists have issued no response to any of your concerns?
Yes.
You know, and your high school teacher is not the person you need to be asking. You need to be writing to somebody who can answer this, who has an upper level degree in this field. It's preferably somebody who's teaching at the university level in biology.
So do you understand what we're saying to you, Hunter? Do you understand what we're saying to you?
Is he still there?
Of sources. When there's so many sites...
See, you haven't even, you're just trying to talk over us with your creationist bilge, and you're not really interested in understanding this stuff. So frankly, we're tired of you. So who else do we have now?
Brian and...
Brian in Pennsylvania. Brian, you on?
Hello.
How are you doing? Thank you for waiting. I think you've been waiting a long time, and we're very sorry.
This isn't Brian.
This isn't Brian?
No, this is Matt.
Matt?
Number 2?
Oh, I hit 2. Oh. I thought I hit 1.
That's all right, because the longer you keep me on hold, the more crap I want to say.
Oh.
Yeah. You sound sick as a dog, dude. Man, you really weren't lying, were you?
I was only calling to thank Tracy for stepping in at the last minute.
You're welcome.
My trip to Washington State, while I had a great time and enjoyed myself there and enjoyed the talk, I caught something on the plane and I've been sick in bed. So quickly, since there's a whole bunch, and I don't want to take up the show even though I'm not on, I'll just hit my quick notes. Awesome job on the problem of evil. Love the examples that both of you gave, and I'll steal them, as you well know.
That's okay. Just pay us later.
On the caller talking about this could all be a test of, for example, intelligence, and you mentioned that it might be skeptics going to heaven. Not necessarily just intelligence and reason. This could be a simple test of humanity and emotion to determine who is not ready to sacrifice their moral compass, their compassion, their humanity, and their integrity in order to worship something that is obviously immoral.
Right.
There's a bunch of stuff coming up with regard to accommodationists. There was this skeptic post the other day that about 80 people sent me, which I'm sure I'm going to rip into because this is the second time she's done it. Meanwhile, the NCSC is congratulating Templeton winners. So this accommodationist trend is to the point where I almost got out of bed Friday night and made a special episode of the Nonprofits, except I couldn't talk.
Just to yell about that. Yeah, I'm really upset about that too, because the simple act of congratulating Ayala, or is it Alea or Ayala? Ayala. Ayala. All right. I always get that confused. The simple act of congratulating him for winning that award seems to imply that it is that it is a legitimate award.
Yeah.
That is worth congratulating someone for, right? When, in point of fact, the Templeton Foundation has always been about pumping a whole lot of money into media efforts to make it appear as if there is some sort of movement within science to validate Christianity. And that's all it's been about. And, if there's any actual evidence there, that's fine. But for someone like Ayala, who comes out, immediately spouts this non-overlapping magisteria stuff of saying, oh, well, science and religion talk about two different areas of human endeavor. And to hand him an award for that and say, there you go, great understanding of our spiritual heritage or whatever the crap it is. And then for the NCSA to say, congratulations on winning that award?
Yeah.
It baffles me. It baffles me. It's like...
I got 3 other quick things, and then I'm going back to bed.
It's like the National Organization of Women giving, Maxim magazine some award for, congratulations on winning, Dick Penis Magazine of the Year or whatever. Because it's awesome, guys. It makes no sense. So
that award wasn't supposed to be announced yet. They just sent me the mailer the other day.
Oh, okay.
So we weren't going to announce that yet, but thanks. I'm gonna kind of take issue with Martin a little bit on the issue of believe. I believe evolution is true. I believe the Big Bang is the best explanation, as long as we're just talking about believe in the simplest context, which is accepting that a claim is true or most likely true. Mm-hmm. So I'm not as, I do understand your point, but I'm not as, phobic about the word believe. It's going to imply some kind of, irrational belief. There are plenty of rational beliefs.
Right, but remember, as you just mentioned with this whole accommodationist trend and what have you, I think that just for basic semantic purposes, I prefer to make the distinction simply because we now have too much of this going on. Well, your scientific beliefs are no better than my Jesus beliefs, and the whole Creation Museum is founded on that rubbish and this sort of false equivocation. So,
and see,
I may seem like I'm too anal about it, but that's just kind of where I am with it.
Yeah, the reason I go the other way on it is because as soon as I say, yeah, I believe that, then that gives them the opportunity to say that, your beliefs is just as irrational as mine, and then I can go on to demonstrate exactly why they're not. Mm-hmm. The last 2 little bits on Hunter with the Cambrian explosion. Everybody should just Google Index of Creationist Claims. Mm-hmm. This one's number 300. The Cambrian explosion, or you're talking 5 to 10 million years is that time period.
Yeah, I've heard up to 80.
There was complex life prior to it. There are transitional fossils within the Cambrian explosion. Not all phyla appear within it. It's not what the creationists are cracking it up to be by a long shot. No. And the last thing, several people keep sending me emails. There's this moron on YouTube who has evidently tried to call me out and then claims that we're chickening out and that I have some Santa complex. This guy, I've seen a couple of his videos. It's the lowest possible form of apologetics, and he's welcome to call into the show just like anybody else. Mm-hmm. But if you're spending a lot of time paying attention to idiots on YouTube, and especially the comments that are made to idiots on YouTube,
life's too short, man.
Don't waste my time with it.
Yeah.
But
that's why I never respond to those emails that we get from people saying, "Here, watch this YouTube video, and it'll make sense of everything." I just delete those.
Yeah.
When we get them, so. Anyway.
So great job, guys. I'm going back to bed, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Get better, etc., etc. All right, man. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Now we can do Brian.
Yeah, I was actually just going to leave him hanging because I'm like, oh, it's Matt. We have real, just other callers out there, so it's sort of like,
no,
all right.
Brian's been waiting.
Brian, who has been waiting forever and a day.
Hello.
We are so sorry. Thank you for being patient with us.
Yeah, patient. Yeah, my clothes are going out of style over here.
Oh, we're sorry.
Who's the guy with the cold? He sucked. Don't put him on anymore.
I don't know how he got through the screeners.
Yeah, I'm telling you. He's this crank who calls us every week. What can we do,
Yeah. Greetings from Pennsylvania, by the way. How are you guys?
Good.
We're good. We're all right.
Good. I just had hopefully a quick question. I have a meeting coming up with my pastor. Now, I'm an atheist. Been an atheist for about 3 years, out of the closet about a year, I guess you can say. And my pastor, who tends to our family's religious, spiritual things, had just found out last week that I'm a theist, that I'm an atheist. I was speaking to him on the phone, and he said he would like to speak with me about this.
Come to the principal's office, young man. We have a problem you must discuss.
Well, it was sort of like that, and I kind of replied that I said, well, I'd love to talk to you about this, and, so we can do this next week. What I'm worried about really is that, I don't know, it was brought up last week on Faking It. I think someone said, can I quote, professional theologians can obfuscate the fallacies, which I believe 100%. And I'm dealing with a 65-year-old man with like PhDs, and I respect him. He's smart, he's intelligent, he's educated, he's wise. I don't understand why he's a Catholic if he's all those things at the same time, but I do respect the man for his views on other things besides Catholicism. So I'm just kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. I think I'm going to run up against some kind of zinger, and I feel like I'm almost like preparing for battle. I've watched a lot of atheist experience videos, and the Iron Chariots. Are you part of that, Martin? Right?
Well, I don't actually contribute to it. I mean, it is a thing that we started up on this. ACA puts it out, but I haven't actually done any editing or any contributions to it. I just enjoy reading it.
Yeah, wealth of knowledge there. I suggest everybody who's watching right now to check that out, because that's got a lot of answers to it.
They've done an excellent job on it.
But it also made me realize that there's going to be a zinger here. This priest is going to drop a zinger on me, because when I went to Iron Chariots, I saw something about the argument for divine sense. Sensus divinitatis. Are you aware of this?
Well, give us a short version.
Everybody is born with a God detector in them, and this makes sure that you can detect and be aware of God. Therefore, you have a chance to know God, and you shouldn't turn God away. This is one of the...
A God detector.
Here's the thing, Brian, I have a little bit, just to break you in here for a second. When I was very young, I left a fundamentalist church, and one of the things I agreed to do before I left was have a series of meetings privately with the preacher. So I understand exactly what you're fearing. I can tell you that this man cannot prove to you, cannot demonstrate to you any evidence for the existence of a God.
No, I'm aware of that. I just want to make a good accounting of myself, because I feel like he's going to pull something out of a hat that's going to back me into a corner.
He's not.
He's going to spring a trap on me. I'm going to walk right into it.
Brian, he's not. I actually had the preacher tell me that he could not demonstrate that the Bible was inspired by God. Now, this is a fundamentalist preacher. Could not demonstrate this to me. He showed me like 1 or 2 verses, and I said, well, what about Luke? And he said, well, do you want me to go through and show you where every book says it's inspired? And I said, well, isn't that what you're telling people? And he said, well, I can't do that, but I just have to believe that God had a hand in creating this book. And I thought, wow, so basically you're saying you don't really know that it is divinely inspired, you're just simply telling people that. This is what the kind of thing you're going to be up against. There is no magic, there's no rabbit going to come out of a hat. Don't worry about it. And know that whatever claim he makes, he's the one that has to demonstrate this to you. You are not in a position to demonstrate anything. You just simply have to sit back and say, how do you know what you're saying is true?
Brian does have a valid concern, though, in that in order to compensate for this lack, right? Apologists will quite often engage in pull little rhetorical stunts to try to put the atheists on the defensive, and this is common, and that
worries me.
Yeah, and that's what Brian is concerned about. And so I think the key is to just always make sure that you're holding his feet to the fire, and again, don't let him draw you into his script. Okay, you just keep remembering that he is the guy with the burden of proof here. He is the one claiming that there's an invisible magic man in the sky. Right. Okay, who can poof universes into existence with an act of will, but apparently he can't cure cancer unless people do science. That sort of thing.
Right.
So just start with what do you believe and why do you believe it, and then just don't let that go. And as much as if you see him trying to sort of skirt around it, always steer him back on course. Just say, yes, I understand that, but just as Tracy just said, and as we just saw in the conversation with Hunter, it's like Hunter's making all these creationist claims. I'm like, well, where did you get that claim, Hunter? Well, I don't know. Do you want me to just go look it up? No, you should know. If you are reading a claim, accepting that claim as valid, and then trying to introduce that claim into your own arguments.
Right.
But you don't even remember who said it, and if that was even a qualified person to have said it in the first place in terms of their credentials.
Right.
Those sorts of things.
Well,
so Tracy's dead right.
Yeah, the other frustrating thing is that he's coming at this from, if I can disprove evolution and Big Bang, there's going to be a God. And that's not where it goes.
Yeah.
I'm still sitting here now, even if I agree 100%, and sometimes I will just do that with people. Let's say Big Bang, evolution, false tomorrow, okay? We find out it's all false. Now, what's your point and where's your demonstration of God?
Yeah.
Right, where's your God, right. Well, the thing that gets me is, I think you touched on this earlier, Martin, and I think you nailed it for me. I find that the free will bomb is dropped quite often. Oh, free will, free will, free will. That's all you hear, as if that one word can make up for everything and prove God exists.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right when you say that, just because you're aware of something doesn't mean you're going to take that course of action.
Mm-hmm. Or that you even can. I wish I could fly, like without use of an airplane, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a helicopter. I'd love to just be able to, zip off like, Neo in the Matrix and, have lunch in Chicago and come back and do whatever, right? Love to.
Yes.
My free will is crying out for that superpower.
You're not using it correctly, apparently. Your free will is not being used correctly.
Not eating enough beans, whatever to get me aloft, just sort of. So there's it's just free will, nothing to do with your ability to
Well, do us a favor if you think of it, Brian, and send us a note to the TV list when you have your meeting and let us know how it goes, because I'd be interested.
Oh, I definitely will. Can I throw in a quick question?
Sure.
I'm a father of a few kids as well, and I'm the only atheist in the family. And do you have any advice for a father, because I'm dealing with a Catholic wife and Catholic kids who are going for their sacraments and things?
I would say write to our list. We have a couple of co-hosts who have children.
That's a Russell question.
Yeah, and
that's
Jen
a Jen
has
question.
kids too. So I think one of the hosts with kids would probably be a better hit on that.
I
would just talk. I would just be 100% honest at all times with your kids, and then if they bring up little questions that they hear from religious upbringing, talk to them quite openly about it. Don't tell them, that's in point of fact, Jeffrey, that's all BS.
Is basically what I'm saying to my kids is, do you really think that's true, and why do you think that? And if all they can come up with is somebody told me, I say, well, maybe you got to do a little bit more of your research. We talk about Bigfoot, ghosts, we talk about all those haunting shows that seem to be very popular we were talking about earlier, and I'm just like, do you really think that's true? And,
ask Russell about that, because Russell actually has a really good story about his little boy encountering like Spider-Man for the first time, and working out this whole make-believe versus the real world difference in his little mind. So it's just talk to them. Call back when they're on, and they'll be happy to.
Right. One more thing. Add Aaron on. You need more YouTube atheists on, please. We'll follow them. And thank you for your time, guys. I really appreciate it.
That was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. We got Leo, I think, was next on the lineup.
Has Leo been waiting? And Leo was before Ali.
Correct.
Indeed. So, so 3. I want to make sure I don't hit the
That's
wrong.
all right.
Leo?
Hello.
Hello.
You're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Martin. We spoke a few weeks ago when Dr. Darrell Ray was there.
Oh, right. Do I? Okay. I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. I wanted to talk, bring it back to what you were discussing at the beginning of the show. You were talking a bit about the lecture on Intelligence Squared with Stephen Fry and Christopher Hitchens.
Yes.
And Ann Whitcomb, and you couldn't remember their names.
Yes, thank you.
No problem, because Stephen Fry is quite a big, iconic character in the UK.
I love Stephen Fry. He's fantastic.
Yes. And Ann Whitcomb, apart from having a terrible shrill voice, I don't know if you know this about her, but she used to belong to the Anglican Church.
I did not know.
And then when the Anglican Church decided they would allow women to become priests in the Anglican Church, that's when she chose to move to the Catholic Church, because she said that the women could not divinely ordain or represent Jesus as ministers, whatever.
Self-hating, misogynistic woman.
Yeah, so a bit of a bit about that, but there was there was a few things actually I wanted to talk about. The thing you were talking about, the Pope. First of all,
yeah, it's a little mean to the Pope.
What's happening in Ireland? I don't know how many people are. I'm sure people are aware. It's quite big news, but the current cardinal, who is now the head of the church in Ireland, and apparently when he was younger, he was the secretary who went around taking statements from people and making them sign affidavits of silence, to refuse, to not speak of it at all. And then when it came out recently, and now he was taken to court on that, and he was asked to resign, he said he doesn't think this is a resigning offense. So that was one big issue that's been happening with him. What's even worse was the Pope now, who was in 2001, he was cardinal, and I want to get his title correct. And Christopher Hitchens mentioned this as well. And I think it was the Independent, but it was one of the main newspapers in the UK was talking about this as well. He was prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And at that time, it's basically like their Inquisition, if you will. But at the time, he wrote a letter which was then secret, but actually came out. I've looked for the actual letter, I couldn't find it, but Hitchens apparently quoted it, and so did the newspaper, stating that he threatened all the bishops of the time to not talk about it by threat of excommunication, to only deal with it internally.
Yeah, I mean, see what I keep saying about crime syndicate? I mean, they behave this way. It's the Corleones, the Sopranos. I mean, where's the difference between, how they handle their little issues? So, about this whole, the thing with the kids here, we're going to talk to you about that. So,
There was another, there was another thing which is a bit more personal. This isn't directly to me, but it's my partner's family. And they were in Austria. And there were another case where pretty much all of her brothers were abused by the bishop, by the priest at the time.
So you have, you know people within your family.
Yeah,
and your
I know the people. Yeah, it's my partners. They're good friends of mine as well. I know them all. They're like brothers-in-law, if you will. They're kind of. I know them directly. There's a few of them. They know of more people. I don't know everyone there, but they estimated that at least 30 people were molested by this one priest. And when the parents tried to raise it with the bishop, first of all, the community so didn't believe it that they actually blamed them, the parents, for it and excommunicated them across the street to avoid them, because they were making stories about the priest. And why would they raise up such horrible things, and why would they do these things? This is like excommunication from the community.
So the attitude was, well, you can't prove that we did this, so we're going to publicly smear you as liars and excommunicate you, and it all just
ostracizing them.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Even I think it was, I don't know how many years later, when finally they got something done. I mean, this was a big process. So first they shifted the priest. Then the police came to investigate, but after interviewing like 2-3 people, they said that it was all the people they had interviewed. They couldn't do anything because of the expiry, the law, the
statute of limitations.
Statute of limitations. Thank you. Yes, thanks. And which is in and of itself quite horrific. But the thing is that there may have been other cases which hadn't passed the statute of limitations, but the police refused to investigate further. Now, I'm not sure if this is because the police may have a law that says that if they suspect it had passed the statute of limitations, they're not allowed to actually investigate further. In Ireland, this was even worse, because in Ireland, the police just refused to report it. In some cases, they just took all the files and took it directly to the bishop and just gave it to them and said, look, what do you want to deal with it? And they just refused to investigate the issues. And the police was actually held to part of the blame as well. So it is really systemic in how this belief system is so it's so much wider than just saying a few people.
Yeah.
Because it gets to the state protecting you, the mechanism that's protecting you, is failing.
Yeah, you end up at the point where you start asking how deep does the corruption go, and the only answer is how big is your shovel, right? I mean, it's just that horrible, and it's that entrenched. At least this is starting to come out, right? And so.
Yes.
But I understand.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, we have seen that trend as well. I mean, I've seen that in the media where I've sat and wondered, these are crimes. I don't care who you work with or what organization you're affiliated with. The cops don't need to be coming to your place of work and saying, would you like to handle this internally? I mean, this is a violent crime. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you don't ask the organization itself whether or not it wants you to come in and investigate. You do your job. It doesn't matter who this is. You come in, you do the investigation, and if somebody's committed a crime, you arrest them. You don't move them to another parish and say, well, we'll just let you all handle that. How about that?
It all ties into this undeserved respect that religion just automatically gets for being religion, right? I mean, imagine if the Securities Exchange Commission went to Bernie Madoff, right, and said, we've got all this evidence of this massive multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme that you've been doing for 40 years. Here's everything we got. You want to just take care of this? Oh, sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do understand.
I'll take care of all that.
I do understand that associations within any association, you're going to have things, skirmishes, whatever, that are going to be internally handled with internal rules and internal doctrines. But at the same time, when you cross that line where you have committed a crime, a criminal act or a civil violation, that's when it now is no longer in the purview of just your little group. It now is a social concern, and the police or the civil authority now has a right to be involved in that and an obligation to be involved in that.
I think, Tracy, I think it's actually bigger than that. I think that just by a quick Google, the number of countries that have been affected, and I counted Austria, France, in Germany, Czech Republic, in fact, Belgium, Australia, New Zealand. The number of countries is just staggering. That's just not less than half the countries, and in each case, the numbers are just coming up and up. And I'm thinking, just on this issue alone, let alone the condoms issue, but just on this issue alone, do we not have enough to get The Hague involved and bring up the Pope for crimes against humanity? Just on this alone.
Yeah, I think it would be great.
Intervene on an international level.
There's already a lot of noise in the media about the Pope needs to resign because of this. It's obviously because of based on his attitude in his quote today, he doesn't seem to think that's necessary. That may be a necessary step. I think that's maybe good to get the dialogue going on that. I don't know if under the Hague's rules that that would have to maybe be investigated. But heck, I'd sure love to see it. Because you're right, it's beyond serious. We thank you for the call and for all the information, but we're down to 5 minutes. We want to go ahead and get to our last two callers before we sign off. So, stay in touch with us through email and the rest of it. And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for calling.
Thank you. Should we hit Ali has been waiting on line 2. Ali?
Hey, how you doing?
We're good. Sorry to keep you waiting here. What's up?
All right, don't worry about it. Yeah, how's it down there? I haven't lived in Houston in quite some time, but I hear it's still kind of nippy, or...
Well, it's weather's pleasant today. We have a nice spring day.
What can we do for you?
That's cool. That's cool. I'm actually calling from Chicago. I'm a theist, a Muslim, and I just want to discuss particularly the issue of default positions with you, if it was okay. I know we don't have much time left, but. Anyways, actually, I've been thinking about this issue for quite some time, and I just wanted to relate that I really don't. I understand sort of the atheist perspective on how atheism is the default position, but my belief in God, I think, is actually predicated more on a default position, and I kind of feel bad because after hearing Brian talk about God radar or whatever, it's kind of hurting my argument right now. But I hope to give more of a kind of a deeper, hopefully a deeper argument if we have the time.
Well, let's see how much you can do in 60 seconds, and then we'll take it from there, okay?
60 seconds, okay.
And we're sorry, we should have got, here we go, the theist caller, everyone in the chat room's yelling at us to get on the air. And, but go ahead.
All right, anyways, I think that default positions cannot be predicated on lack of belief, because if that were the case, the belief that atheism is the default position would actually precede atheism itself. Therefore, I could say basically I lack the belief that atheism is the default position, and therefore I do not have to accept atheism as the default position. So it would seem better to say that we predicate default positions on beliefs rather. So.
Actually, I think that what we should do is predicate default positions on where the evidence lies as pertains to any particular claim. For example, again, what should be the default position on I have an invisible magic elf living in my sock drawer? I mean, should the default position on that be not believing it, or should the default position be believing it? I would suggest that the default position on that kind of claim would be I am going to reserve belief until there is sufficient evidence to make that it makes sense to believe that there is such an elf living in my sock drawer. And so that would be, so I would use evidence as the benchmark from that. So.
Certainly. I think it's implicit with everybody to say that, I have to give reasons for whatever I'm claiming. And I think that also extends to atheists as well, especially when they claim theism, that they're irrational, etc.
Well, tell you what, you want to call next week and talk to Matt? Because we're going off.
I would love to have
We got
a
a sign.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for the crew.
Oh. Are we off? Are we off?